everybody, I'm Dennis Daly. I spent 20 years with United Press International, most of it with the old UPI Radio Network. And my favorite assignment was going on the road producing and hosting American Montage. It was an hour-long weekly program. Now here's an edited version of one of those shows. Here in the studio is Jean Shinto. She is a nationally recognized author, and her latest book is called Huddle Fever. Now, even though she's dealt with sports heroes before, Huddle Fever is not about football. It's about the immigrant experience in America, dealing with her time in Lawrence, Massachusetts. I think there is a lesson in this for all of us, not only the way society changes, but the way demographic groups come into the U.S. Jean, I grew up, as my listeners know, in southern Indiana near a city called Jasper, which is almost entirely German in ancestry. As a matter of fact, a lot of people there have a very strong German accent still. Ironically, it's in Du Bois County, which is actually Dubois, and the second largest city in it is Ireland. So on St. Patrick's Day, you saw a lot of German people running around with German accents wishing everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. But I guess that's America. If you will, tell us why you picked Lawrence, Massachusetts, and when you first came up with the concept of putting together a book that deals with how we all got here.
It was involuntary because I moved there because of my husband's job. I moved there from Washington, D.C., a major city, obviously, and I'd never lived in an industrial city before, or let's call it a deindustrialized city these days. And I looked around and saw all these old brick factories and these tenements, and I'd never quite understood how cities grow this way.
Take us back, if you will, and put it in the historical perspective, where Lawrence is in Massachusetts, geographically, and when it was first settled and by whom.
Lawrence is about 25 miles north of Boston, close to the New Hampshire border, so picture it between Boston and the New Hampshire border. And in 1845, some Boston businessmen who had made a lot of money in Lowell, about 10 miles south on the Merrimack River, in textiles, decided they'd do it again in Lawrence, only bigger. And so they dammed the river up there and built the city literally overnight. And luckily for some, and not so luckily for others, the Irish famine had just occurred, and they came and worked first, and building the mills, in fact, and the dam. And then later, subsequent immigrant groups came. The men did get rich, but the immigrants suffered in a lot of ways.
In many ways, it sounds like a Western boomtown.
Oh, yes.
You hear of places like Gillette, Wyoming, which overnight they strike silver or gold or something, and the next thing you know, there's a town there.
Yeah, so many of those early newspaper clippings really have that aura. The dust, in fact, from the construction gives it that Western feeling, too. And there was the saloon atmosphere and lots of men rather than families coming, to work.
Historically, I guess we also need to explain why the river was so important in an era, obviously, before electricity. I mean, all the historic textile mills had to be on some source of power like that.
Yes, we forget, but I call it geography is destiny for some of these places because of those rivers. Those industrial cities dot these rivers. The water power moved those turbines and the belts and the gears and made the machines go. Later, steam came in, and then electricity, of course.
Maybe this is a naive question, but how was the message of America spread? How did these people in Ireland, and you said that was coincidentally where a lot of people were being displaced, how did they suddenly find out that there was gold, streets paved with gold, and opportunities on this side of the Atlantic?
Well, immigrants often have these important networks between one another. There are rumors that the mill owners put out posters in Italy, for example, showing people running from the mills with great bags of money. But this is sort of a myth, and no poster has ever been found like that. They've only been described. But I think that it was just that immigrant network, families communicating, letters, people going back and forth, too. We have to remember, I think the family situations were strange. We, in our family values way, think, oh, this golden age of family. But in Lawrence, it was different. Women, of course, worked, and that was common. one of the first daycare centers was in Lawrence, Massachusetts, run by the Venerini sisters. They brought them over from Italy because the parents worked. It was 1905 or 1906 or 7. They were brought over by the church so that both parents could work.
Yeah, I get the impression you mentioned Lowell several times, which is Ed Mcmahon's hometown.
Oh, really?
And I was talking to him on this program a couple of years ago, and he was describing an interesting kind of Currier and Ives city.
Oh.
We were talking about wintertime in the interview, but the fact that I sensed that there was a little bit more gentility, maybe, or at least Irish Catholic family there in Lowell than in Lawrence.
Well, it was even more farther back than that, not necessarily even Irish Catholic, but we'll call them American, for lack of a better term, but these were farm girls that they brought from New England, Maine, and New Hampshire, and it was supposed to be just a brief stint. They would work there 4 years and then go back, because nobody would ever want to work in a factory for life, would they? It would just be so awful. We never would want to happen in the United States what happened in England, that Dickensian situation there. So here we would do it differently. Of course, greed took over.
How awful was it? We just passed an anniversary about 3-4 weeks ago, not to totally digress here, of the Triangle Shirtwaist Company fire in New York City. And the reason I bring that up is nearly 200 workers died in a cramped loft in New York City for a very strange reason, very tragic reason. Management knew where the other stairwells were. Labor didn't. The employees had to pass through a very narrow hallway, single file, that was set up to keep them from sneaking anything out of the building. So all of the things that the ownership had put up as structure to regulate the employees served to be their doom.
Yes.
When it was all over. How much of that caste system, if you will, and that's the way I look at it, was present in the management of the early 1800s in factories? Then what were conditions like?
Yes, in the early 1900s. Well, in 1860 or 61, I forget which, there was the Pemberton mill collapse in Lawrence. That was also due to the fact that they had wanted to build things bigger in Lawrence. They brought in machines that were too big for the floors to sustain them. They had made the windows bigger because the building was bigger and they needed more light. So 5 stories went down. That was unusual, though. I think one of the most difficult things about working in a mill in, say, 1900 was the noise. And if you go to Lowell, in fact, now they have a working weave room where you can walk in and experience that awful noise that people experienced 12 hours a day, often enough. And they give you earplugs as you walk in because it's just such a din which vibrates your entire body. Your ears are a minor part of it. Your fingernails seem to be vibrating too with this noise. You had to stand, of course, and that was one of the hierarchical things where you, if you had a good job in the mill, you had a sit-down job. It was also very dirty. They just brought all this wool and cotton straight, raw, into the factories and washed it, and washing it over and over again, and the greasy steam would come up.
Boy, no EPA, no OSHA. Was there ever an effort of any local citizenry to say, hey, this is just not right?
Well, sometimes, but it's also cut by this, that everyone was so happy to get a job, too. It was work, full employment, and we have to remember how advanced, really, we are now.
But we still hear that. I mean, if there's any phrase I'm personally tired of hearing, it's shut up, be happy you've got a job.
Yes, it is. It's true. I realize that, and yet it's a reality. That's a hard one.
Jean Shinto, thank you very much. The book is called Huddle Fever. We've talked around it and through it, and I hope we got the salient points of it. It's a wonderful book, and it's a topic I think we think about too little, and that's how we all got here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
And there you have it, another edited episode of one of the American Montage programs prepared for the UPI Radio Network back in the 1980s and 90s. I'm Dennis Daly. Thanks for listening. Thanks for going with me this week. And check YouTube for more American Montage programs.